Great customer service isn't just about having friendly employees or fixing problems quickly. It's about creating a culture where every team member understands that exceptional service is everyone's responsibility, not just the customer service department. When you build this kind of culture, it becomes your competitive advantage. Customers feel the difference, they stay loyal, and they become your best marketing team by telling others about their experience. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jose Juarez. Jose is the founder and CEO of Victory Solutions, which is a direct marketing and follow-up company specializing in the motorcycle industry. He is also the founder of BarbaCuban, woo-woo, which is a specialty sauce company, which is in over 500 public stores in Florida. In July of 2015, you guys, this is an impressive thing. In July of 2015, Jose was on ABC Live with Kelly and Michael in their show doing a grilling contest. He won the competition that was judged by Food Network stars Alex Garnaschelli and Iron Chef Marcus Samuelson. Jose won the title of America's Next Grill Star, and he has since appeared many more times in that show. So we're going to explore how to build and maintain a culture where outstanding customer service isn't a policy, it's a way that your entire team naturally operates. Welcome, Jose.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
I'm so excited. This whole thing with the food or the America's Next Grill Star and the BarbaCuban sauce and everything. But going back to you starting your other business, your first business,
Yep.
and maybe it's not your first business, but your Victory Solution, and talking about customer service. When I was thinking about this topic, I knew exactly who I wanted to talk to, and it was you. Just because we've had conversations about this before, and I was so thoroughly impressed. I'm like, we need to dive deep into this. So my first question is,
Yep.
what does a true customer service culture look like?
Well, it's really empowering your people, and a lot of this that we're going to talk about is that it's a culture where you actually care about what the customer says. Where you're not just going through the motions, you're not just repeating whatever's on the wall, whatever statement is. It is, I truly care about you. I truly want to understand what you're looking for and how I can help you achieve that. I started this business, whatever it is now, 23, 24 years ago. And the whole idea that came to me, I was in the car business at the time, was, how do we set something up where we have business intelligence, right, directly to a consumer so that they understand what is going on in their store. And the only way to do it was by being able to connect with folks, finding out what they're really looking for, how they really feel about the store, mm-hmm. where they will open up and and be able to share with you.
Right. Because a lot of times they don't until it's too late.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and if you have a culture out there that just kind of goes through the motions, and number one, they're not empowered to do that, that's what's going to happen. Or if you have a culture that says, everything that somebody tells me, I'm going to take personally. They have an issue, so I'm going to take that personally. When a lot of times when somebody has an issue, what they really want to do is they want to talk about it. They want to explain to you where they're at, and you got to be able to open up and listen to them and not take it personal. And that was one of the things that, as we've gone on through the years, it's kind of interesting. You can give some folks information on what is going on in their organization. And I used to run into issues, especially in the service department area, where they would, the service manager would get upset. Couldn't understand, like, well, why would they say that? They never said it to me. Well, they're not going to say it to you because of exactly how you're reacting to this information. And you're not going to get better unless you address it.
Do you think that's the biggest reason why businesses are not consistently delivering that exceptional customer service, or do you think it's that they really don't think it's that important until all of a sudden they start losing sales?
Well, they all acknowledge it's important, but then the actions aren't there.
Hmm.
So what ends up happening is they may put statements on the wall, they may do this and that, but in at the end they really don't care, and that is shown
Hmm.
by lack of action. You know, lack of really understanding the
Right.
customer. Yeah, they start losing sales, and you know their frontline people are never empowered. They can't answer. You know, one of the things I hate is that I'm not able to do that, or that's beyond my pay grade, or or that's not our policy. Oh, can't stand that. That's not our policy. You know, and that's what ends up happening a lot of times is that we hear that, and we don't,
Hmm.
don't listen to the customer. I recently just ran into an issue where a dealership needed training, not a motorcycle store, but it's actually an automobile dealer. Where I have a vehicle, I have an issue, and I'm like, hey, I'll drop it off, but I need a loaner. Oh, we don't do that anymore. We're not allowed to do that. We're not this. We're not that. If you want to wait on it, those are the kind of things that just turn you off right away. It's like, they sell you something, but then they don't want to service it.
Right.
So,
What role do you believe leadership plays in modeling the right behaviors and setting that tone?
100%. It has to start at the top.
Yeah.
It can't start anywhere else. If you walk the walk, and they see you, acting in a certain way, that is key. Without that, you're never going to get there. And it also starts with, again, empowering your employees to let them know that, hey, you're going to make mistakes. And I had that, one time, early in my
Uh-huh.
career. I think I was a sales manager at the time for two divisions for a company called Mark III. And the president of the company, I would always go to him because the culture before that was one of 100% control, right? So micromanage. I couldn't make a move anywhere unless I cleared it, with the boss. And I used to go to his name is Clark Fatuli. He's been retired since, but Clark came in one day to me and he said, "I trust your judgment. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. So just use your judgment. You don't need to go, to me on everything." That to me was huge. It was empowering. Now I had the ability to be able to make the decisions that I felt were right. And we have to do that same thing if we're leading and we're saying, hey, we want this culture of customer service. It starts there, but then empowering the folks to say, take care of the customer. Take care of them as you would your friend. Take care of them as you would, your spouse, your family member. Treat it like that. Treat those folks that way in the same way that you would, and it'll translate.
Right. It's all about empowering, like you said, from the very beginning.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
For sure.
that's really the key. You know. Yep.
Right. So when you're looking at hiring people, is it possible? And if it's possible, how are you able to hire people that you know will naturally fit into that culture of nurturing customer service?
You don't always know. We've been very fortunate. We have employees here that have been here 18, 20 years doing the same job, which is really difficult in the telephone and the customer service and in that area. So you can interview people, and do the very best you can. Are they friendly? I never use, like with our company, I don't use preemptive dialers. Never have. Could I make more calls an hour? Absolutely. But what our whole training is, before you make that phone call, read the notes, understand the customer that you're going to be following up, find out a little bit about themselves, and every time you're talking to them, find out a little bit, another nugget on them, find out something else so that you really truly have a relationship. And we've had throughout the years we've had situations. It's kind of interesting. Uh, Women, honestly, they do the best job at listening. Us guys, we don't do a very good job. We have to work on us harder. That's the truth. Where that's what I found is that more caring and really listening to the customer. When I first started, it was one of those things like my whole goal was like, we got to get 50 calls an hour. We got to do this. We got to do that. And that was the wrong approach.
Yeah.
The approach needs to be spend as much time as you need to with the customer. That's okay. And if you only talk to 5 customers in an hour, but you have this great quality, that I'd rather have quality versus quantity. And early on in our company is I purposely kept it as a boutique company for 23 years. We've had companies come in and out of this industry that, all the way through. I've always kept it to about 100 to 110 clients. And I wanted every one of them to feel like you're the only one. You can reach me at any time. It doesn't matter when it is. Here's my cell number. That's the other thing is I give out my cell number. Here it is. Call me anytime.
Wow.
I'm interested. And if you need something,
That's so
our
right.
folks have that same mentality where, they can reach us with a phone call. We're going to call back. And I think that's what you got to have is treat every customer as if they're the only customer you have.
It makes them feel important,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. So how do you train this? Is it something that a system that you've set up, like a handbook of this is how we're training our employees on this, or how is that something that you can train? I know our listeners are probably listening. Okay, well, that sounds great, but
Yeah.
how the heck do I train people to do this?
Well, like in our particular situation, I don't record calls, but we're there all the time listening, and have managers that are listening to the conversation, and we'll coach on that. I call them teaching opportunities, teaching moments, and you really learn by doing. You could go into a classroom situation. Even I do sales training for dealerships. And the one thing I've always hated is like, oh, well, we're just going to do this mock up and you're going to say this, I'm going to say that. And at the end of it, I'm going to close the deal. And it's like, that's not real life. Real life is you finish as you're training, you're making phone calls, right? And then when you get off that call, you say, let me ask you something. Why did you say that? What did the customer say? What was the deal? And then we have I'll look at completed interviews on a daily basis. I scan through them. I'm very involved in the business in that way that, I'll go through and I'll look at hot leads, completed interviews, what information to gather. And then part of the training is you got a team member that gathers all this information, and then you bring them together and say, how'd you do that? Tell us how you did that. How were you able to gather this information? How are you able to contact more people than, than over here? We want to learn from you. And that's really, you start off, you find the best person possible, depending on what the scenario is, and then you basically inspect what you expect. So you're training real live fire. I call it live fire. When we do sales training, we call customers up, and we don't. It's our training is like, okay, there's the telephone, here's the customer, here's the information. Let's give them a call, and let's just see what happens, because sales is liquid. I call it. There's no scripted area. It moves around, and and anytime you get into, if we're talking about customer service, that's what we do. They hire us to basically be their gather information and improve their customer service. Where we're thanking them for coming into the store, we're asking them questions, and their first 3 questions are scripted. Everything else is free flow. I'll have dealers go, can you give me your script? I'm like, well, everyone's different. My script is, thank you for coming in. How professional was your salesperson? And did we have the product in stock? That's the script. 3 questions. Well, how do you gather all this information? Because we truly care about the customer. So one of the things we do is we'll sit there and they say, well, I'm just looking. Everybody's just looking. That's how you get rid of 99% of the salespeople. Just looking. Well, just looking means you haven't earned the right to ask any questions. And you've got to connect
Sure.
within
I
that
like that.
45 seconds. if you don't connect right away. So when we hear just looking, we say, oh, that's great. Is this your first motorcycle? Oh, well, most of the time it isn't. No, no, no. What was your first bike? Oh my gosh, my first bike was this. And I was 8 years old. They always remember the first. And we start a conversation to really understand the customer. And by the end of that conversation, we know exactly why they didn't buy that day. We know exactly what they're looking for, and we feed that information back. That same salesperson, the reason that we have survived 23 years with never doing a contract. My contract is I have to perform for you daily, weekly, and monthly. If I can't perform for you daily, weekly, and monthly, you have the right to fire me. Just give me a 30-day notice. I don't want to do a contract. I don't want to hold a piece of paper. I have to perform. I have to show you. Our team has to show you, and we have to be worth what you're paying us. And if we're not, you should not be held by a contract. It's a handshake deal, and I've never been burned, in all this time. Is it a fit for everybody? No. And there's been times when I have called customers and said, this isn't working. Because we give you this information to try to help you change the culture, and you don't want to change it. And all I'm doing right now is just taking your money, and it's just not working. Because I'd rather do that than for you to stick with me 9 months or a year and then tell everybody, oh, they were terrible. They didn't help us. If I realize you're not teachable and we can't get there, it's okay. It's just not for you. That's probably
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
You're not, and that's honesty, right? That comes down to that. That's showing who you are as a person to your customers, and that just builds more trust.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about our company is I've never advertised ever. I don't even prospect. I don't prospect. 100% is referral from day one. 100% is referral business that we get, and for different areas, and we've built that reputation to be able to say, yeah, this is where they're at. And we even get to a point where when I know the ability of our folks, when we do promotions, I'll tell the dealers, here's the deal. If it doesn't pay for itself, you don't owe me anything, and I'll bill you at the end of it. It's basically, what do you have to lose, at that point. So, and that's just, when I looked at doing business, and one of the things I always hated was, the fact that, and I'll get people that'll come to me, and I'll have, we've got new dealers that we get all the time, and they'll be somewhere else. But then I hear, yeah, I got to get rid of this contract. I'm trying to buy out of this contract, trying to do, whatever. If you stop doing business with me, you're not ever going to say, well, it was because of, they didn't treat me right, or they didn't do that. And that's kind of like, that's been our reputation from the start. But that's where the culture really kind of starts there. And I've had folks that just weren't going to make it in this. So we try to find, all right, is there another place on the bus? Is there another seat on the bus that you could fit in with this company? Because it's not going to be in the customer service area. It's not going to be in that area, and not everybody's is made for it, and then and sometimes you just have to say, hey, this isn't good for either of us. You're not having fun. You're not enjoying it. So
I go back to something you said, and it basically sounds to me like you have really succeeded in the realm of having your associates, employees, your team members create relationships with these people as they're talking to them, and that's what actually gets them to open up. Like you said, they care, and that's hard to find, and that's why you've been so successful.
Yeah, it's probably so. It starts with you caring about the employee too. It starts with it's your birthday, and I'm going to ask you, what would you like me to? I have a kitchen in our from the start. I put a kitchen in our place, because food to me is like we're it just draws everybody together, right? And I'll sit there and say, well, I'd like I'm going to make you whatever you want, or I'll come in earlier and have breakfast ready for everybody, or whatever the case is. People get fed here pretty well. So or you just come in and say, gas prices have been going up like when they were or whatever, and just come in and here's a $50 gas card for everybody. Thanks for coming in. I really appreciate you. And I know it's costing you more to come in. Hey, here. I know that you may not spend money going to the movies. I know you love the movies. So I little birdie told me that. Here's a gift card here. Here's that. It's these things that we're in this business. It's a huge turnover business. We haven't had that.
I'm sure.
And we've had different situations throughout, where I've had to learn. I came from, when I started this thing, from my motivation, in the car business was really money driven motivation. There was motivation on title, money, hitting goals, wanting this, wanting that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I first came into this thing thinking, well, everybody's motivated by money. No, they're not. There's some people that are not at all motivated. You got to have enough money to make a living, but they're more motivated by, somebody going, hey, you know what? When you go on vacation next time, what I want to do is I want to buy dinner for you.
Jose, this has been a phenomenal conversation today. Thank you so much, Jose. And thank you to all of my guests.